Hey everybody, Al Noraker here for KastKing. And you know, for years you've trusted KastKing for affordable quality rods, reels, fishing line, maybe tools and accessories, almost everything you needed for fishing. But what we haven't had was bait and terminal tackle. Well, brand new to the KastKing family of brands is a new brand called MadBite. Now we're going to complete that fishing experience for you by offering all those things that you need to tie onto the end of the line to actually go catch fish. We're going to start with some species-specific kits. And these are kits that are designed for the trout fishermen, the bass fishermen, maybe crappie panfish fishermen. These high piece count kits are going to include all that terminal tackle and baits and lures that you need to actually go catch fish. So you're also going to see us come out with lures, soft plastics, and other terminal tackle items. You'll see that coming very soon. But to start with, I want to start showing you the new species-specific kits. Not only am I going to show you what's all included in the kits, but then to help you out, if you're new to fishing, I'm going to walk you through everything that's included in the kit and show you exactly how you rig it, how you tie it on your line, how you use jigs, how you use bait setups, everything you need to know to actually go be successful in the water. So that's new from MadBite, species-specific kits, and a lot of lures and baits coming as well. So let's get started talking about the species-specific kits. This is the new MadBite Bass Fishing Tackle Kit. It includes 187 pieces of the most important terminal tackle and lures for catching giant bass. Inside, you'll find snap swivels, a wide assortment of weights including worm weights, Dropshot weights, and split shot. There are 65 different hooks including round bend worm hooks, extra wide gap worm hooks, bait holder hooks, and even Dropshot hooks. We've included 2 crankbaits, a lipless crankbait and a medium diving crankbait. There's worm stops, jig hooks including both tube jig style hooks and round ball head jig hooks. There's tube jigs, swim baits, curly tail grubs, and a wide assortment of plastics, including 2 different sizes of Senkos, creature baits, and finesse worms. Everything is included in this beautiful plastic tackle box to keep you organized on the water. No fisherman can go fishing without fish hooks, so we've included 65 different fish hooks in the new MadBite Bass Tackle Kit. That includes bait holder styles, Dropshot hooks, wide gap worm hooks in 2 different sizes, and round bend worm hooks also in 2 different sizes. Sinkers and weights are critical to getting your bait down to where the fish are actively feeding. We've included 3 different styles, including worm weights, split shot that are easy on and easy off, and even Dropshot weights. Rubber stoppers are the perfect way to keep your bullet weights perfectly positioned when Texas rigging. Anglers can never have too many snap swivels, so we've included a nice assortment of brass snap swivels in 2 different sizes. Crankbaits have always been one of the most popular ways to catch big bass. We've included 2 options, a medium diving crankbait that imitates a minnow, and also a lipless crankbait that can easily be fished at various depths and at various speeds. Tube jigs are another very popular method for catching big bass. We've included tube jigs plus the tube jig hooks and round ball head jig hooks to make sure you get them down to the proper depth. Soft plastic Senko type baits can be used for either Texas rigging, wacky rigging, or even drop shotting. We've included 2 different sizes in 2 of the most popular colors. There's a large assortment of finesse type worms that can be used for drop shotting, Nico rigging, or even Texas rigging. Creature baits like these lizards can sometimes be exactly what big bass are looking for. White swim baits and curly tail grubs consistently catch big fish. So that was a quick look at everything that's included in the new MadBite Bass Fishing Kit. Now it's time to talk about how we actually attach those to your line so you can go be successful in the water and actually catch some fish. You notice there's a lot of stuff in this kit. I mean, it's jam-packed full of some really good baits. By no means does this represent everything in the industry. In fact, there's probably more different styles, colors, sizes of baits for bass fishing than any other kind of fishing in America. It's a very, very popular sport. So what we've done here is we've given you some of the best, and I'm going to teach you now how to set those up on your rod so that you can go be successful. Now, what I thought we'd start with is talking about what we call hard baits. And there's two of these included in this kit. One is a crankbait. So crankbaits are basically a plastic molded bait with 1, 2, or 3 hooks on those. They have a clear bill in the front, and basically what that does, it helps it dive down. So every different crankbait will dive to different depths depending on how large the bill is, how big the body is, how fast you retrieve it, and what weight line, diameter of line that you have on your rod. So, this is kind of a basic bait, minnow-shaped bait that'll dive somewhere between 4 and 8 feet, again, depending on line diameter and how fast you retrieve that. Very good all-around bait. It's a simple process to attach this to the line. Now, you can use a snap swivel if you'd like. Basic number 7 brass snap swivel. You can tie your line right to that snap swivel and then just use that to attach to that split ring on the front of the hard bait. That makes it very easy to change baits because you don't have to retie the line. That's one way to do it. But typically with a hard bait like this, we're simply going to tie it directly to our monofilament or our fluorocarbon leader. And there's a number of different knots, and I'm really not going to get into all the different knots in this video as we talk about this, because I think you'll find one that's easy for you to tie and you feel it is very strong. Now, what I'm tying right here is just a basic improved clinch knot. It's the knot that I use quite often for many different things, but I'm just going to tie that on. The one important thing to remember with any knot, you always get that knot wet. So when you slide that up and tighten it in place, it slides very easily. It doesn't damage the line. And we just trim off that tag section. Okay, so now that I've tied this crankbait on, this is again a crankbait, kind of a shallow to medium diving crankbait. As it's pulled through the water, it digs and dives in down like this and looks like a bait fish, maybe an injured bait fish, depending on how you're making that retrieve. You can retrieve this as a steady retrieve, or you can use it as a pause and jerk type retrieve, but a crankbait is a very good all-around bait for bass fishing almost everywhere. Now, another type of crankbait that is included in this kit is this one right here. This is called a lipless crankbait. Remember, this one had a clear plastic bill on the front that helps it dive down, and the line is attached right to the front. Okay? A lipless crankbait has no clear plastic bill that helps it dive and dig down. So the action of this is quite different. You actually tie your line to the top right here, and this bait still wobbles and has motion under the surface of the water. But what's really nice about this is you can fish all different depths because it's actually weighted, and this one has some rattles in it. You can probably hear this rattle if I put it right close to the microphone. Okay, so that rattling action also gets the fish's attention. Now, you can fish this very, very deep. You just make that long cast and actually count it down, let it fall, or let it fall all the way to the bottom. And then you can do a straight retrieve, so it just swims straight in the water and wiggles as it goes. Or you can almost jig it. So you're using the tip of your rod and picking it up sharply so it swims up and then falls down again, and swims up and falls down again. Those are kind of the two of the most basic actions. But in the kit, you have 2 different kinds of crankbaits. A billed diving crankbait like this, or a lipless crankbait. Once you get used to using different crankbaits, you're going to go to a store sometime and look at all the options. There are tens of thousands of colors and sizes and brands and styles. We just wanted to get you started with 2 of those. Okay. Now, the next one I want to talk about, drop shots. Okay? In fishing today, I would say in bass fishing, both smallmouth and largemouth, finesse fishing is getting to be extremely popular. So when we talk about finesse fishing, often that is one of the techniques there is referred to as drop shotting. And drop shotting will also often use a small plastic worm like this, or maybe a little finesse worm like this, maybe even a little bit larger one like this. They're all included in the kit. Okay, but the rigging method is a little bit different. So we're actually going to have a hook, but not at the end of the line. We're going to have a hook that's up here about 12 to 18 inches above the end of the line. And then we're going to have a weight down here at the bottom. And I'm going to show you how to rig a drop shot. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that we can actually rig a drop shot on our line. The first way is we're going to use what is just considered a standard drop shot hook. And it looks like this. It's got kind of a wide gap. It looks almost like a bait hook, but it has a straight shank and a wider gap like this. And we need to make this hook attached to the line, again, about 12 or 18 inches above. Now, there's 2 or 3 different types of knots that you can use to make that happen. I use a Palomar knot, okay? So I'm just going to double my line over like this, and I'm going to push it right through the eye of that hook. Just like that. Now I've got both pieces of line through the hook. If you can see that, just like that. And I'm going to make one overhand knot with that. Now I have a loop. I'll put that loop right over the top of the hook itself. Get it wet. And I'm going to draw that down tight over that hook, just like that. Now, you have the line that goes back to your fishing rod, and I have the dropping end that goes down to the weight. I'm going to push that right back through the eye of that hook, down like that. So now, when I extend this out, what we want is this hook to stand straight out on the line like this. We don't want it hanging way down. We don't want it sticking up. We want it to hang almost straight out. And you can actually adjust it slightly if it's not quite right. But we'd like that hook to be just about straight out from the line like that. Now I'm going to take a drop shot weight, and you can really use any kind of weight. We have split shot in here. You could squeeze a split shot against the end. You could tie on another type of weight, but we've included actual drop shot weights. And you notice it has a little metal keeper at the top here. Makes it very easy. You don't even have to tie a knot. You just push your line right through the opening at the bottom and then cinch it up, and it grabs that line just like that. And you can leave that tag end. And I haven't had to tie any knots at all. So what you end up with is a hook at the top, a weight down below that takes it down to the bottom where those fish live. That's a drop shot setup, just like that. Now, what do I put on that? Well, there's any number of plastics, okay? Here's a little 3-inch Cinco. There's 2 ways to rig it on this. I can rig it wacky style, just like this. That's called a wacky rig. Hook it right through the middle of the bait, and you can see how it just kind of wiggles in the water like that. Or I can also rig it through the nose. Just push that hook down through the middle and come up like this. Okay? Now that's more of a standard drop shot or a rigging style for that worm. Stick straight up like that. Now, again, that's the standard drop shot hook. I could also take a longer worm like this. Rig it again either way. Wacky in the middle, or I could rig it through the top of the nose, just like this, okay? And have my bait sticking straight out like that. That's another way to drop shot. Okay. Now, also included in the kit here is a wide gap hook. Now, you can use this for drop shotting exactly the same way as we did that other drop shot hook, all right? Same thing, we tie that Palomar knot, loop it over the top, put the tag in down through the bottom, but now we just have this bigger wide gap hook. That's very good if I wanted to, maybe like that one bigger worm, like if I wanted to rig this bigger worm, this is when I might use a larger wide gap weedless hook. And in that case, I simply start it at the top, like this, run that through, pull the hook down, turn it over, and rig it just like this so that worm is sticking out just about straight, and it's more of a weedless design. Okay, I can even skin hook that point a little bit more into that body of the plastic so it doesn't get hung up on anything. That's another way that you can rig a drop shot with a bigger worm like this. Now, you can also wacky rig even the small one using a wide gap hook like this. And again, right through the center, just like that. Now, I typically don't use this type of hook for that. I would typically use this smaller drop shot style hook for that rigging. But there's different types of hooks in the kit. There's wide gap hooks, there's straight round bend worm hooks, and of course there's EWG or wide gap worm hooks for wacky rigging, or I'm sorry, for drop shot rigging like that. Okay, so that's the drop shot. Basically, you've got a weight at the bottom, you've got a hook somewhere between 12 and 18 inches above it with a small kind of a finesse bait, and you either make a cast or drop it straight down, and you're trying to give that worm action. That's a drop shot rig. Okay, so we've talked about crankbait fishing, hard baits. We've talked about drop shotting, one of my favorite techniques for finesse angling. Now we're going to talk about Texas rigging, probably one of the most popular and common ways to fish plastic worms or creature baits, that type of thing for bass fishing, both in kind of open water and heavy cover situations. So let's talk about the hooks to begin with. There's generally two styles of hooks we're going to use for Texas rigging, and they're both included in a couple different sizes in the kit. One is a EWG or extra wide gap worm hook, just like this. The second is a regular round bend worm hook. The gap is quite a bit different, and the hook is quite a bit different shape than the extra wide gap. They both work great, and they both have particular applications. The next thing we need for Texas rigging is a weight to get that bait down to where the fish are eating. That's typically a bullet style weight, like this. Lots of different sizes, from 1/8 of an ounce all the way up to even 2-ounce tungsten weights if you have to punch through very, very heavy cover. But generally speaking, it's going to be a bullet shape, kind of looks like a bullet like this, and it's going to fit right on your line above your hook. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay. The other thing, as far as the kind of line that you use, this happens to be braid. If you're fishing super heavy cover and you really got to kind of yank those fish out of some really tough conditions, guys will use very heavy braid, maybe 50, 65, even 80-pound braid. For the most part, you're probably going to be using either a monofilament or a fluorocarbon line. So that's what I'm going to use for my demonstration today. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to attach our bullet weight. We're going to put it on our line. Now, there's a couple things about this. To start with, I'm just going to put it on the line without a weight stop. Okay? And you can see it slides up and down. If I move my hand, it would just keep sliding. Okay? That's one way. Other times, you want that weight to be pegged or attached very close to the head of that hook. And in order to do that, we're going to use one of these little bobber stops, or weight stops, if you will. They can also be used as a bobber stop. That's why I call it that. These are also included in the kit. They're just a little rubber bumper, and they're attached to this little wire. And it's very easy to get that onto your fishing line. You'll notice there's a little loop on that wire. So all I do is I take my fishing line and I push it through that loop like that. Now I grab that rubber bumper and I just pull it onto the line. Just like that. Okay, now once it's on there, I can just pull the other side through, and now that little stop, that little rubber stop, is attached to my line, and it's going to help that weight come to a stopping point. Okay, now I'm going to take that end of the fishing line and put it right through the hole that goes through that worm weight, just like that. And you see now it stops up against that. We can adjust that position just by sliding it down the line, closer or farther away from my worm hook. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach my, in this case, a wide gap EWG worm hook. And you know, for this purpose, I'm just going to tie a normal improved clinch knot. There's Palomar knots. There's all kinds of different knots that you'll probably learn how to tie as you get more practice. I use this one quite a bit. Remember, always get your knots wet. That's very important as I cinch that down. Then I'm just going to cut off that tag end. Okay, now what we have is we have our extra wide gap worm hook, and we have a worm weight right there. Now, if I don't slide that bumper down there, you notice how that worm weight can slide up and down. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it can get too far away from the hook and get wrapped around a stick or something, and you end up with a little bit of an issue. So that's why I'll often take that little bumper stop and slide it right down, and now it's pegged or it's stopped right up against that hook like this. Okay, so that's the purpose of that little rubber stop. I can move it a little further away if I want some play in that bullet weight. Okay, now let's say we're going to use a big creature bait like this right here. So you notice there's a little R bend like this in that hook. We're going to just start the end of this hook right at the top of the nose of this creature bait, just like that. And we're going to pull it down about the length of that little bend right there. Okay, just down, and then it's going to come right out, just like that. We're going to push that up over the top, kind of turn it over, because we want that bait to ride nice and straight on that hook. So I haven't put it into the hook yet, but I want to measure that by kind of lining it up so that it's really straight. And once I do that, I can see the point of that bait that it needs to go into that creature bait head and pull free, just like that. Now my bait is nice and straight on that extra wide gap hook, just like that. Now, it's almost weedless, but that point is exposed just a little bit. So now what I can do is I can take that and just what we call skin hook that into the bait. So now it'll slide over through weeds and over rocks and bushes, sticks, and it doesn't get hung up on the bottom. That's a weedless rigging style. Now, when a fish hits that, they bite down here and it exposes that hook. See that? Very easily, and there's a lot of gap there. So when I feel that fish stop that bait, I can set that hook and penetrate that point into its mouth. But when I'm rigging it, I'm going to just skin hook it a little bit like this so it rides weedless and I don't get hung up and lose my baits and my hook and my weight and all that. Then I'll often take that little sliding weight stop and slide it right down. That is a typical weedless style Texas rig. And I can fish that in really heavy cover, or I can fish that just dragging it across the bottom. That's a very good way to fish Texas rig. Now, if I'm using, say, more of a straight Cinco like this, I might want to go down to a little bit smaller wide gap hook. But the rigging is the same. I start it right at the top, just bring it in about 1/4 of an inch like this, slide it up to the top and bring that right up. Now, of course, my line is already tied on. Typically, I'm not doing that right now. But again, I want to measure to make sure this bait is straight. Now, I've measured my point. I know where to mark it. Right there. The point comes through right across the top. And just like that, I've got a very nice straight, I can even straighten that out a little bit more, weedless style extra wide gap presentation. Again, I could have my weight pegged up against it, or I can have it sliding up and down the line. That's how I might peg a bigger type plastic Senko. Now, if I want to fish maybe a little more of a finesse bait, maybe I'll go down to a straight shank type worm hook. But the rigging method is the same. I've got this little bend, so I want to take it out of the hook at that level. But in this case, with a straight shank hook, I want to take it in at an angle. Just like that. So now that hook is coming out at a bit of an angle. I'm going to turn it over, slide it up to that eye. Again, I'll measure it so it's nice and straight right there, and pull it out the top. Now, you can see that's definitely not weedless, right? So maybe I don't want to take it out quite that far. I want to keep that hook in there, or I can skin hook it a little bit like that. So now I've got kind of a weedless that fishes. When he bites down, he's still going to get the point, but it's going to slide over and through grass and over sticks and things like that. So these are all Texas rig methods where I have a weight that is on my line sliding up and down, and I can adjust it, hold it in place with a peg, or just let it free standing like that. But it can be used with so many different baits, creature baits, or little finesse worms, big long worms. You can even do it with little short 3-inch Senkos like this. That's a typical way for Texas rigging. The weight is on the line, it's either held in place or it's free sliding, and you're using either a wide gap weedless hook, like an EWG hook, or a straight shank worm hook. That's Texas rigging. Okay, so let's talk about the next one. One of my favorite ways to fish for almost any species is a tube jig. Tube jigs are just awesome to use. They can be fished in heavy cover. They can be fished on flat gravel bottoms. They can be fished free swimming through the mid-water column, not even on the bottom. But it's very simple. So you've got a tube jig, any color you want, any size. I put some of my favorite colors in here for bass. And a jig hook. This happens to be a tube jig hook. So it's got a 90-degree eye. Some have 60-degree eyes, but it's got kind of a thin conical shape lead head to get that bait down. I'm simply going to stand that tube jig straight up like this, take the eye of the hook, push it right in, and slide it all the way to the back, just like that. Okay, so there's my tube jig. The weight is inside. The point is exposed, but I've got this big bump here. Now I'm just going to pull down on that and expose the eye of the hook, just like that. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever line I'm using. In this case, it's a fluorocarbon line. I'm going to tie that right on, just using my favorite improved clinch knot in this case. Again, use whatever knot that you want, always making sure they're wet. You just wrap that through, bring it around, tighten it up, and you've got a tube jig that's ready to fish. And again, you can let that fall all the way to the bottom. You can hop it up and down. You can fish it vertically. You can throw it into heavy cover. It's not a real weedless bait because that hook is really exposed this way. So that makes it a little more difficult to fish it in heavy weeds, but it's a great bait to use. That's fishing a tube jig, and you've got lots of tube jigs in the box. And of course you have the conical shape tube jig hook inside the box at all. Okay, so let's talk about another method of fishing. One of my favorites here is a curly tail grub, right? These curly tail grubs work for a lot of different species. They're great for bass, obviously, walleye, crappie. This happens to be a little bigger one. I'd use this size probably more for bass and walleye than I would for crappie, but it works great. I'm simply going to take out of the box this little round ball head jig like this, and you notice there's a little hook here on the poured lead portion. That's a keeper, a bait keeper, to keep that bait from sliding off. Now I'm just going to hold that jig or that plastic straight up like this, hold my jig with the point down, start it right in the center, bring it down about 60% of the way, so it's nice and straight. And just that fast, I've rigged a curly tail grub. Now I can make a cast, let it sink, straight retrieve, and this tail will just spin around, or I can jig it and swim it up and down like this. That's another great way to fish for bass, is this curly tail grub, which is included in the kit. Now, this same jig head can be used for swim baits. Okay, so this looks kind of like a minnow, right? It's got this big paddle tail that will swim back and forth as you're drawing it through the water. It's a great bait. You can use this same ball head jig for that. Now, this is a very light one, kind of a small hook, so it's not going to sink very deep, but it's the same idea. Just hold that straight up and down, start it right in the middle of the bait, and down to where you know it's the right length. Have it come right out the top, right in the center, just like that, and force it up right against that ball. And now you've got a ball head jig set up for the swim bait. And it can swim through the water. Again, you can jig it up and down a little bit, but a swim bait is another very good technique, and you've got those in here. If you need it to get a little bit deeper, I can go back to that same longer shank, heavier head, conical shape. This is that tube jig hook. It actually works very good in this as well. So again, I want to make sure this tail is pointing down. Okay, so this is the top of the bait. I want to keep that facing towards the hook. Start right in the middle. Go right down through the middle and make sure it comes out right in the middle on the top of the back of that swim bait so it swims straight. Now I've buried that hook in there, and now I've got a little bit deeper swimming, heavier jig head with a longer shank hook for that swim bait as well. There's one final way that you can fish a swim bait, is I can use the big EWG hook, just like this. Now, on the EWG hook, we want it to come out the bottom and have that hook riding on top, see, like that. That's the tails pointing down. That's the top of the swim bait, okay? So we eventually want it looking just like that, okay? So when we're going to do this, we're going to run this right inside. We're going to only come out about 1/4 of an inch down, and then we're going to turn that hook around just like that, so it's facing up. Now I haven't embedded it into the hook yet, so I'm going to measure it so it's nice and straight. I know exactly where it needs to come out. About right there, come right up through the center of the body and across the top. And now I have kind of a weedless presentation of a swim bait with a, see, that's not going to get caught on anything because it's embedded in the body right on the top, but when that fish bites down, it exposes that point just like that, and you can set the hook. Now, there's no weight on this, so a lot of times if I'm fishing really, really shallow grass areas, I can get away with a weedless presentation. But you can add some weight to the front of your line as well if you wanted to fish that deeper with an EWG hook. And in fact, they even make these EWG hooks with weight already attached to the shank of the hook. That's also a good way. Those are not included in the kit, but that is another option. So we've talked about a lot of things here. So we've talked about the different types of hooks, worm weights, drop shot weights, little finesse Cincos like this 3-inch. We've talked about swim baits. We've talked about creature baits, using that on a Texas rig style. And of course, one of our all-time favorites, tube jigs, right? All of that is included in the kit. I hope that helps you just kind of start working on your rigging techniques. There's a lot more ways to do it, but these are the basics. If you learn these, drop shotting, Texas rigging, tube jigs, swim baits with ball head jigs, and curly tail grubs, and of course hard baits, the crankbaits like this, either a lipless crankbait or a diving crankbait like this. Those methods are definitely going to catch bass for you on a consistent basis. Then you just got to find your favorite colors and sizes, and you're ready to go. But everything that you need to get started is included in this kit, and I think you're going to find great success. So I hope that's helped. I'm Al Noraker for KastKing and of course for MadBite Baits, and go check it out. The new MadBite species-specific bass kit. Over 180 pieces of all the right things included in a plastic tackle box, and yeah, I hope to see you on the water real soon.